Paper was like gold in medieval times.
Oh, not tobacco, sugar.
That everything we thought we knew about the world might turn out to be completely wrong.
June 2008, Gettysburg National Military Park.
We said it's a beautiful night. Let's take one more ride through the park before we retire home. We were going very slowly, and all of a sudden, we saw these soldiers coming out of the woods. This man in the front had blood going across his face. They had weapons, and they were heading straight for our car.
This is National Park, Secrets and Legends. Gettysburg National Military Park is just 80 miles due north of Washington, D.C. And in the darkest days of the Civil War, this 4,000 acres of peaceful countryside was drowned in blood. In July 1863, 7 million bullets were fired here in just 3 days, transforming the land into one of the deadliest battlegrounds in history. While driving through the park in 2008, Wayne and Joanne Krause are surprised by a group of soldiers who suddenly appear in the middle of the road.
We had our lights on, high beam, and they did not veer away when they saw the light. As we sat there, both of us startled, they just walked around very closely. They never looked at us and marched past our car. I looked out. I could have touched them, but I certainly didn't want to. What the heck was that? And I looked in the rearview mirror after they passed, and there was nobody there.
We looked at each other and said, "What was that?"
There's always going to be questions of what really happened that night. It was very unnerving, very unnerving.
Gettysburg was the Civil War's bloodiest battle, and its 3 days of vicious fighting is considered to be the turning point in favor of the North. Each year, the battle is replayed by thousands of Civil War reenactors. Could this explain what the Krauses saw? November 2000, Civil War reenactor Rich Mendoza and a few friends drive through the park's biggest battlefields on a foggy night.
As we drove through it, I said to the guys, did you happen to feel that? And they're like, feel what? I said, there was like a chill. It just went right through you as you entered the fog. And they said, no, I didn't feel anything. So we pulled over on this road. The fog was there. And we looked across the field in this direction towards the Confederate lines. And we saw 5 guys walking. As our eyes adjusted to the darkness of the night, we noticed that they've got rifles. And we thought, okay, there's reenactors out on the field. And the first guy, the guy with the rifle on his shoulder, raised his arm up in the air. A second man seemed to be falling, like he was weak at some point. And the 3 of us would respond at the same time, like, he fell again. And the more we watched this, we were like, are they people? It just didn't seem right. And this film loop thing continued over and over and over again.
A few of Rich's friends decide to take a closer look.
So 3 guys went over the fence and they started going forward. And eventually they came back and their statement was that they could never get any closer. Whatever was out there kept the same distance as they tried to move towards it. So finally they just gave up and came back. So we all kind of thought like, okay, these are ghosts.
Rich believes the mysterious apparitions must be 5 men who died during the Battle of Gettysburg.
Are they still trying to get back home? Are they still trying to get back? Do they know they're dead? There are spirits in this town that died violently. They were perfectly healthy men and boys fighting a battle. 2 seconds later, they're dead.
The violent battle that gave birth to Gettysburg National Military Park is legendary. It's unparalleled in ferocity by any other battle on North American soil.
The sheer number of people that were killed in this area is just absolutely staggering.
When the fighting ended, over 10,000 dead and 25,000 wounded men were left on the battlefield. That July, the dead outnumbered the living.
The day that the Army pulled out, it was pouring rain, came down in buckets. The bodies of the soldiers who had died were wet and decayed. The casualties, as described by the participants, were just awful. Men decapitated, men disemboweled. These are the bodies that they had to bury, and it would have been horrible.
Thousands of soldiers killed far from home were hastily buried in mass graves.
Unconsecrated burials, sudden death, unexpected death, violent death. That creates the perfect storm here at Gettysburg for ghosts.
Could the huge number of violent deaths in just 3 days at Gettysburg somehow be linked to the ghost sightings that occur here?
The ferocity of what happened, the short time frame in which all this bloodshed occurred, absolutely impacted that site.
Though it's believed the bloody Civil War battle could be responsible for the ghost sightings in Gettysburg, the truth may lie elsewhere.
Way before the Civil War, the earliest settlers in Gettysburg spoke about seeing actual spirits of dead Indians.
Gettysburg National Military Park, one of history's bloodiest battlegrounds. It's claimed the fighting was so intense here that it transformed the area into a hotbed of paranormal activity, with hundreds of ghost sightings reported every year. But could there be more factors at work? Many believe that this area was haunted long before the Battle of Gettysburg.
There is so much phenomenon that's been reported before the Civil War here. And this goes back to the American Indians, when the Iroquois Indians actually had possession of the Gettysburg property.
It's claimed local native tribes long believed that this area was a place of power. And there's evidence that extremely bloody tribal wars were waged here.
When I was a young ranger here, I used to go to people's houses and they'd have a mason jar full of bullets. They say, see all the bullets I collected while I was out on the battlefield as a kid? Right next to it would be a mason jar filled with arrowheads. So there's evidence that this was not just one battlefield, there was a prehistoric battle that took place here.
Over 350 years ago, Iroquois warriors overthrew Gettysburg's native tribes, and these battles created a wealth of paranormal activity.
Many of the early American settlers spoke about seeing actual spirits of dead Indians and warriors, and also hearing sounds such as war whomping, which was very common at the time that the Indians were there engaged in battle.
Although the blood and death that the park has seen may contribute to the intense paranormal activity, one thing is not clear. Why does Gettysburg have many more ghost sightings than other battlefields around the world?
One of the interesting things about Gettysburg is the geological strata that is here underneath. The so-called Gettysburg Sill is almost completely granite. Black granite, which contains quartz, is an incredibly electrically conductive material.
Some believe that these quartz deposits have the unique ability to store energy from traumatic events that occur here.
Because Gettysburg is underlain with substantial quartz crystal, the natural setting itself, the landscape, would have worked as a kind of a time camera. And things that happened would have essentially been photographed here holographically by the environment itself.
It's believed that upon dying, the human body emits a huge burst of light energy known as a death flash.
So you have this burst of electromagnetic energy that is coming from the dead, the dying, and the wounded. Here at Gettysburg, that happened thousands and thousands and thousands of times over. With all this electromagnetic energy bursting forth, some of it was captured in the quartz.
It's claimed that when this trapped electromagnetic energy is released from the quartz crystal, a ghost-like apparition is produced.
We believe that what we are seeing, some of this visual phenomenon, is actually being created not above ground, but from underneath the ground.
Peter Jordan has been tracking electromagnetic emissions at Gettysburg for many years.
When somebody will report, for example, that they see an entity, we will simultaneously report a burst of electromagnetic energy that is registered and measurable. Energy is given off, great bursts of energy.
The ground under Gettysburg National Military Park may explain many of the ghost sightings here. But there are also reports of more complex paranormal activity, where the apparitions don't act as ghosts at all.
A friend of mine and a friend of his were up on Little Round Top after a reenactment, okay? And it'd been a hot day, so they're relaxing in the cool air in the evening. And out comes this, apparently they thought another reenactor.
Hello, fellows.
They said, though, he was the most authentic reenactor they'd ever seen. And he looked at him and he said, mighty hot fight there today, wasn't it? They kind of smiled and agreed, yeah, it was a hot day. And he reached in his cartridge pouch and he pulled out a couple cartridges. He says, you boys may need these tomorrow. And he looked at them and they were tied correctly at both ends, and they had this little film of beeswax. And all of a sudden, my friend realized these were real cartridges.
Thanks.
And he looked up and the guy was gone.
Just here, wasn't he?
Not knowing what to make of the cartridges, the reenactors give them to a park ranger for inspection.
When the park ranger had the bullet examined, he determined that this particular cartridge was from the Civil War, and it had the original gunpowder in it from that particular period.
These mysterious and extraordinary lifelike encounters are referred to as intelligent hauntings.
What is it about Gettysburg that is so unique and special that it would allow for those types of manifestations to take place here?
The answer may lie in a Civil War field hospital.
I rank it as one of the weirdest, scariest experiences I've ever had in my life, because it's almost as if time was reversed.
The ghostly beauty of Gettysburg National Military Park has scarcely changed since the American Civil War. But this historic landscape could also be a focal point for intense paranormal activity. April 2001, a shocking discovery is made at the Daniel Lady Farm, which was a field hospital during the battle in July 1863.
Right here, there were 3 or 4 rust-colored lines of liquid. And then there were drops of the liquid all around, and they seemed to be crystallizing right before my eyes. And I looked at it, and I looked up to see if there was anything broken, a pipe broken or something, rust stains. And I said, I don't understand this. So I got a yardstick, and I put it down, and I took a couple of samples.
A few hours later, the red liquid inexplicably disappears, leaving only a strange layer of dust.
And I'm like, how could this happen? I said, it was here, now it's gone, and there's even dust. Was I in a time warp or something?
Samples of the red liquid are sent to a top forensics lab.
3 weeks later, the results came back. The liquid was blood. The species was human.
The last time these floors were bloodied was during the battle in 1863.
And what was going on here is the soldiers that were wounded were brought in here. They were lined up all along the corners here, some out in the hall, sitting around, suffering. And we have evidence of their presence here in kind of a gory way. Right here is a blood stain, okay? There's another one over here that I can show you as well. Right there you can see 4 fingerprints and a thumbprint. So this is a man's agony etched here in his own blood.
One man who suffered here was Corporal Daniel Doherty.
Son, I'm Dr. Black. I need to examine your wound.
He'd been pulverized by an exploding shell that pierced his back and exited his abdomen.
He would have been brought into the farmhouse. His wounds would have bled very much, huge volumes, and passed down into his pants. The wounds were so serious that they were described later as having cut him in half, so he would have bled to death very quickly.
Could the blood that appeared on the farmhouse floor in 2001 actually belong to Doherty or one of his compatriots?
This is one of the experiences that I absolutely cannot explain. I rank it as one of the weirdest, eeriest experiences I've ever had in my life, because it's almost as if time was reversed.
How could 19th century blood suddenly appear in the present day? One man's story may hold the answer. Lawyer Andrew Bashago claims that as a child, he participated in secret U.S. government time travel experiments.
I served the United States government in different time travel capacities when I was age 7 to 11. Time travel that ultimately took me here to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863. I found myself tumbling through essentially branching wormholes, really violent tumbling, and literally tumbled into 1863.
Bashago claims that his father was a scientist in the government's time travel program and landed him in some farmland near the battlefield at Gettysburg.
My dad said that we don't want anybody to see you arriving, so we're going to put you down on this road right here.
A soldier points Andrew towards town, where President Abraham Lincoln will soon be delivering his immortal address.
Whoa, son. Where you headed, boy?
To see Lincoln, sir.
What regiment you in, boy?
People were gathering to attend the speech, and this was early. It was hours before Lincoln would arrive. I was sort of intimidated by the prospect of standing at Lincoln's feet. I then walked to the front, and I saw a man setting up his camera on top of a small stepladder, and I believe that that was the Civil War photographer Matthew Brady. That picture, until 2007, was the sole surviving photograph of Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on the day that he gave his speech there, and I'm in it.
Gettysburg Park's unusual geology, combined with its bloody battles, had created a unique environment where Civil War apparitions seem to interact with visitors to the park. But some maintain that these aren't merely hauntings. They believe that the U.S. government has been conducting time travel experiments at Gettysburg.
The time travel technologies that I encountered were new, dangerous, and experimental. The U.S. government secretly stepped over the threshold of time travel here at Gettysburg.
What could possibly explain the park's alleged ability to act as a portal to travel back and forth through time?
Quantum physicists believe that we have a multiverse, that there have been postulated many different dimensions. So there can be parallel universes that exist and parallel timelines that can exist. Maybe what's going on in some of these cases has to do with some sort of a time slip where dimensions are interacting.
This sudden, forceful interaction between parallel realities seems to create an effect that resembles time travel.
In the same way, for example, that two automobiles can enter an intersection at the same time and crash into each other. Timelines converge and collide, and the human beings that are occupying the respective timelines literally perceive each other, because at that point in time, they are in the same location.
We could have a kind of interphasing going on between timeline A during the Civil War and timeline B taking place today, and that this interphasing of these two timelines actually allows them to merge, as it were, and to become coexistent.
The brief overlapping of two different time periods could explain why certain apparitions seem like actual people, accompanied by real objects.
The Gettysburg Battle was the largest land battle in the Western Hemisphere. There were hundreds of thousands of combatants. Whenever an event occurs of that magnitude, it tends to become more readily embedded on multiple timelines.
Many believe the abundant quartz crystal at Gettysburg not only captured the explosive, traumatic battle, It may also explain how people and apparitions can slip between dimensions.
I believe that there is a layering of different things that are taking place here, beginning again with the earth, first and foremost.
Native Americans in the area centuries ago believed that quartz was a sacred stone, and some claim they used it in their own time travel ceremonies.
In many rituals involving the American Indians, they would actually cut themselves to allow fragments of the quartz to go into their body because they claimed that it would aid them in their shamanistic, out-of-body experiences and their spiritual travels. We don't know what the scientific basis of that belief is, but we do know that quartz is an incredibly mysterious and powerful energy source. So when you have it in such large quantity in an area, we do not know what else it is capable of doing.
The presence of Gettysburg in many locations of the multiverse could mean that even if the battle is over, on other timelines, it's still ongoing.
Trying to prove that there are ghosts and they exist, that's passé. We're beyond that now. What we want to do is try and communicate with them and get some information from them.
What we are doing is almost reliving these experiences here, reliving certain portions of the war along with these spirits.
The history of this battle actually began in July of 1863, but it hasn't ended.